Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm here with Dr. Erica Jordan, who is a clinical assistant professor of human development and family studies at the University of Houston. And she is here today to talk to us a little bit about what college students can do to prepare for graduate school or for the job market, specifically thinking about what's happening this spring. It's early March, and we know that there's lots of stuff going on to prepare for the end of the school year. But what are the things you could be thinking about now to help you prepare for the next steps in your career? So thank you, Erica, for joining me this morning. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and kind of dive into whatever you want to talk about today.
Thank you, Dr. Langworthy. I'm so excited to be here. And so thank you also for inviting me. I love undergraduate education. This is my 7th year as an undergraduate faculty member. I'm here, been in a few different institutions, but I'm passionate about undergraduate education and really sharing tips that students can do to put themselves in the best possible position to be competitive in the future. Should we just jump right into it? In terms of, okay, well then let's do so. So starting off with your freshman year. So freshman year, particularly for, this tip is similar for those who think that they might want to go straight into the job market following graduation from the university, and those who think that they also might want to go to graduate school. This tip is actually pretty similar. And my main point is to explore and connect. This is a time for major exploration. The world is your oyster, so to speak. You want to definitely be sure that you keep yourself informed about the different types of major areas of study that your university offers. You know, maybe you came in with a preconceived notion about what you wanted to major in. Maybe now you've taken a class or two and you're like, oh, I'm not so sure about this. This definitely happened to me. I changed my major a few times, and that there's nothing wrong with that. This is the time to be exploring. So be sure, even in this second semester of your freshman year, that you're continuing to explore all of those different options, looking at the different classes, and really doing some soul searching related to what you think you might like to study over the next few years, and then ultimately use as a stepping stone to your career. I'm not going to plug a lot of books, but when I was an undergraduate, I sort of became obsessed with Road Trip Nation. It is a PBS public broadcasting show, and also they have a series of books. And this is I think this is their newest book. It came out in 2015. It's called Roadmap: The Get It Together Guide for Figuring Out What to Do with Your Life. And it really has a lot of different exercises. You can see that even I still engage in this process. A lot of different exercises to explore what you really care about, what you're most interested in, and what you would be committed to studying. So in addition to exploring areas of study, you also want to be exploring through connections on campus and even off campus. Definitely, maybe you've gotten to know a particular faculty member. Even if you haven't gotten to know a particular faculty member, now is the time. You still have a couple of months left. You can drop by their office hours, say, hey, I really enjoyed your class. I just want to learn more about what you do and more about maybe potential career options in this field. Start to get some face time with these faculty members, because you're going to need them later on. And the more interactions they've had with you, the stronger letters of recommendation they will be able to write, the stronger, more positive references they will be able to provide for potential careers. So you want to be exploring your connections on campus and even also doing so off campus. Just a note, something to remember at all stages of life. People do overhear things and people do talk. So we definitely want to be sure that we're putting our best foot forward from the beginning. We've all maybe said things that maybe we regret it. Maybe we were irritated about a grade that we received. But we want to try and keep that in check as much as possible, because people do overhear things. Faculty members know each other, community members know each other. And it might not be right, but things do get around. So you want to obtain a reputation for being a positive departmental citizen, a positive university citizen. You don't want to be one who has that reputation as being a difficult student, constantly grumpy, complaining student who causes a lot of problems. So just food for thought, sort of a bonus tip for me.
I think that's a great point, and I especially like the point about letters of recommendation. So when I was doing some instructing several years ago now, I would have students who would ask for a letter of recommendation, and I didn't know them really at all. But being in a big university system, I knew them better than most of the other professors they worked with, just by the nature of the system being so big. But I think you're right. If you can take those steps early on to make sure that you're making connections with the professors in your department, or even in other departments, that can be really, really valuable down the road.
Definitely. Even if you send, it could be as simple as sending a nice email saying, I really appreciated this, and be specific, which aspects of the class you really appreciated, or things that you learned about, because that's one of the things, sometimes to jog my memory, I immediately go back to my class records. Did they come to class?
Yep.
Did they attend class regularly? Did they submit their assignments? And then also I search my email trail, because then that'll start to jog my memory. Oh yeah, she and I did have this conversation, or he and I did have this conversation. Okay, they're interested in this. And so, I mean, when you're seeing 400 students a semester,
right,
it can be difficult to keep track. But if you begin to form those relationships early on, that can make all of the difference in a standout letter.
And the other thing about that too is that warm fuzzies are free. I love that that phrase. Like, you can be nice and just say like, hey, I really loved your course. I really learned a lot from it. Like, even just sending that email. I know sometimes we feel like everybody gets too much email, and that is a thing, but I don't mind getting the nice ones. Like, that's great. That warms my heart. Like, oh, what I did mattered. That's cool. I love hearing that. And so if that can be the impression that you leave with your professor at the end of a semester, or at the end of a unit that you found really interesting, that can be really powerful down the road.
Definitely. I mean, I have a file in my email called Happy Comments, and that's where I go.
Yeah.
Throughout the day, so I don't mind getting those emails at all. I read them and they go straight into that happy comment file.
Yep.
I have some constructive comments as well, but I just certainly don't mind getting those emails. Another thing to do during this freshman year, it sort of goes in with connecting and exploration, is begin to conduct some informational interviews with people on campus or with community members. You want to keep these short, be respectful of their time, plan what you're going to ask them before you go in, research them. But if there's someone who's working in a field or a job that you think you might be interested in, learn as much as you can on your own, then prep some questions, go in and have maybe a 20-minute interview with them, just to learn more about their career. Most people are flattered to talk about themselves, talk about their career. So usually people are very willing to do this. And this is a way that you can begin to explore. Finally, the final point for both tracks is be sure that you start record keeping now.
Yes.
It's something I learned from my father.
I was so bad at this.
I'm not a good record keeper. I am not, but thankfully I had a parent who kept files well, and he started doing this when I was, in K through 12 school. So I had a file, because you don't remember. Everybody's so busy, you're not going to remember everything you did, but you might decide to take a track, and something you did in the past that you weren't even thinking it would be helpful suddenly becomes relevant.
Yep.
If you go back and, oh gosh, I did do this. I can talk about this experience in my cover letter. I can talk about this this particular training or workshop. So what I do now, and I still do this, I'm not a very good record keeper. So I dump everything in Google Drive, and I periodically download it into some hard drive form, so that then I have a relatively up-to-date version of the things that I've done. And I just keep it just a running reverse chronological sort of list. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it'll at least help me to then go back and research the exactly what I did, so that I can include that.
That's great advice.
Yes. If you think that you are grad school bound, maybe you already came in with a very directed career path, now is the time that you do want to go ahead and begin just starting to look at some graduate schools, looking at that GPA requirement. Of course, in both areas, you want to have your GPA as strong as it can possibly be. This will help you to be competitive in the long run. But just start exploring some grad school programs, and definitely on your campus, be sure that you start to investigate what type of work, specifically what type of research the faculty members there are engaged in, so that maybe you can think about, which one or two faculty members would I be interested in approaching to see if I can work in their research lab, or maybe if it's not maybe a research focused discipline, to see who might be able to serve as a mentor for me. They have similar interests to me. So start exploring internally on campus, as well as getting a feel for the different types of graduate programs that are out there. So that wraps up freshman year.
Woohoo.
Yeah. Then moving on to the sophomore year. So again, you have similar points, sort of they diverge a bit depending on which track you think you might be going. But here you really want to begin to obtain experiences related to your interest. So I always say, you don't want to only go to class and get good grades. Like, that should be the beginning. But definitely you will stand out if you have relevant experience that's related to whatever you say that you're doing. It's sort of difficult to believe that someone really knows what they're getting into. Let's say if they want to work with at-risk youth and they have absolutely no experience working with even just youth, period, let alone at-risk youth. So you want to begin to start, seeking out experiences in the community and sometimes even on your college campus to gain experience that's somehow at least broadly related to what you want to do. So if you know you want to work with kids, try and find, here we are in March, it's the time to be exploring summer career opportunities, summer internships, summer jobs, summer volunteer opportunities. Start to explore organizations in your community that work with kids. And I have myself literally Googled children, whatever the city and state is that I was living in, because a lot of these positions won't be advertised. But if you explore the organization, learn more about what they do, and then contact the director, they might be more than willing to have an extra hand throughout the summer to come and assist. If you know that you are going into business, try and get some practical experience related to whatever, if it's marketing, if it's sales, try and get as close as you can with your volunteer, with your work experience over the summer. Don't be discouraged if you cannot find something that exactly fits. Because at the very least, you will be able to demonstrate that you can make a commitment, that you can work with other people, that you can follow through on your commitment, and come to work. And then you have another person who you can potentially ask for a reference later on. And then you just never really know where some paths might lead. So I was a journalism major. Of course, I would have loved to be working in a magazine in one particular summer. But I didn't apply on time or something. Maybe I didn't know. And I didn't get a particular internship with the magazine for this one particular summer. So I worked at Barnes and Noble, selling books. But I definitely went out of my way to do the job well. I spoke to the customers, and two opportunities emerged from that. First of all, an editor of one of the magazines came in to make a delivery. I started talking to him, and he ended up giving me his card, and I actually ended up getting an internship for the following semester out of that experience. And then a second thing that our manager, I think we lost one of our sort of public relations, marketing, community engagement type people. One of those staff members, they left the company. And so we had this opening that temporarily needed to be filled for a community engagement PR type person. And the manager noticed that she thought I might be good at that. And I was able to take on that role too. So, that expanded my role. And you just never know. That's the point. So whatever it is that you do, you will be able to develop some skills that will be related. And you never know, sometimes there can be additional doors that can be open. Now, if you know that you're grad school bound, particularly, let's say that you know that you want to go into a research program, it's not too early during this sophomore year to start exploring research opportunities. So hopefully you've been able to make some connections during your freshman year. If not, go ahead and make them now. And then approach faculty members about volunteering in their lab. Some might even have work experience in their lab, just so that you can get your feet wet. And that's one of the main things that a lot of graduate programs are looking for, is research experience. Now, some professional programs are a bit different. Let's say that you're planning to go to law school, then you might want to approach law firms and see what type of positions, summer positions might be open there. Business schools might be different, medical schools might be different, but you want to try to obtain some relevant experience. And one good place to start is your university's career center. A lot of times when places are looking for interns or volunteers, they will advertise at the University Career Center. However, do not stop there. You can still use that Google search method of whatever it is that you're interested in doing in your city and state. And I will tell you that me and my god sister, both one particular summer, went through the yellow pages. Back then they were printed more often than not. And we literally called people. She was calling psychologists because she was interested in that field. Now I don't remember what I was interested in at that time, but we literally called people, and she got a job with a psychologist's office that summer, just from cold calling out of the yellow pages. And so you can go to yellowpages.com for that one.
Yeah, you don't have to use the printed ones anymore.
You don't have to use the printed ones anymore.
I don't know if those exist anymore.
Me neither. They seemed like they were such a waste of paper. Yeah. But
the
but
other thing
they were helpful for us.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I'd add there is just that you'd be surprised reaching out to your own networks, what you can get out of those connections, and sometimes that feels weird. And sometimes you think, well, I don't really know anybody other than other students, but you never know like who one of your friends' parents knows, right? And so if you start putting out your feelers ahead of time and say, I'd be really interested in doing something in psychology. Do you know anybody who does anything in psychology?
Definitely.
Or, asking your professors, hey, I'd like to do this kind of thing. I don't know anything about it. Do you know anybody? That's for me, when I was in college, I reached out to one of my professors and I said, I think I'm kind of interested in the brain and neuroscience, but I don't really know. And he was like, well, I have a good colleague, friend of mine, who's a doctor here in town, who's a neurosurgeon or neuropsychologist, I guess he was. And he was like, he might let you shadow him for a little while just to kind of see what that's like. And lo and behold, he did. And so that was just from me saying to my professor, hey, I'm kind of interested in this. What do I do? So don't be afraid to reach out to your professors or to your networks, whether that's friends or your own parents and their networks. Like, there are, people who then know people who know people. So that's how networking works.
That is. You use your connections. And I am so glad that you brought up shadowing. That is a great experience. That, again, can give you the real view of what the day-to-day experience is like in that particular field before you go and spend years studying and then get into it. You're like, wait a minute, I don't want to do this. So you want to definitely use that network and do not be ashamed or embarrassed to say, this is put yourself out there and say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Nobody's going to, you're not held to that for the rest of your life because you told people you have to do this for the rest of your life. You can change your mind. So don't be afraid to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in right now. Do you know of anyone? I'm glad you brought up the faculty members too, because when I was an undergraduate, I actually got another job. This was with a market research firm that one of my faculty members, and he was in communications and I took a political communication class with him. We just happened to be talking. I said I was looking for a summer position or a spring position, and his wife owned a market research firm in town. And I had an amazing experience working for her and her other colleagues. So you just never know, definitely. And then that shadowing, again, don't underestimate shadowing, even if it's only for half a day or one day, do it. Okay, in terms of the junior year, you want to continue to use your resources, and also, and so this is, now we're starting to divide ourselves a little bit. So if you were on the career track, so to speak, you think you're going to go straight into a career right afterwards, try to continue to use your resources, your network, to continue to gain more practical experience. The more experiences you have, the better. But then also begin to look for leadership opportunities on campus and in your community. So hopefully you've been selectively choosing, and selectively, you don't want to overcommit yourself so that you're not doing a good job. But hopefully you've been selectively choosing different organizations to become a part of on campus or in your community. Well, now, if you've been working with the organization for a year, it might be a great time for you to take on an officer position or some other sort of leadership position. And these things look great on your resume. And more importantly, they really do give you practical skills that you can then use. Some of the things that I did, as officers or presidents of campus organizations, I still use some of those same organizational skills, when working with people or with even planning lectures on my day-to-day. You'll find that a lot of these different skills transfer. So continue to gain experience and seek out leadership positions if possible, and then do a good job and continue to build your network. Of course, you definitely still want to be utilizing your Career Services Center if you have one in a major way. Many of these centers, I know ours, for instance, is a standout career center. They offer a lot of different mock interviews, resume building. They help you with your LinkedIn. They'll help you market yourself, help you develop an online presence, all sorts of things. I mean, it's just a myriad of opportunities. I'd like to say you're paying for them. So please, get your money's worth while you're at that institution. If your institution does not have a Career Services Center, look for other opportunities in town. Sometimes the local Parks and Recreation Center in town, or some other community colleges even, will sometimes offer public workshops and seminars. So definitely take advantages of your resources.
And also, I would not be a good internet person if I didn't recommend lots of YouTube videos that also delve into some of these topics, especially if you're just trying to get your feet wet a little bit and trying to figure out, like, what do I need to be thinking about? There's lots of great videos about things like resumes and how do I even prepare for a job interview, or what do I need to wear to a job interview, and those kinds of things. So you can start
Please
to
look at these things.
You can get that information ahead of time. It will make your life better. It will also make the person who's interviewing you, their life better, which is good if you want the job. So be sure to do your background research.
Life better.
Yes, all of it. Everybody will be happier in the end if you do a little bit of legwork on the front end to find out some of that information and get those questions answered so that you can be the most prepared possible walking in the door.
I'm so glad you brought that up too, because we didn't have all of these resources available to the same extent when I was in college. And so there's just a wealth of information out there. So like watch this broadcast, watch other broadcasts like these, because this provides you with the foundational information. And then if you have more specific questions, you're able to really maximize your time, your face time with a professional in the field or someone else in the field. And you can ask questions that maybe you cannot get easily from the internet, but you don't want to waste time having them repeat things that you could have easily researched on yourself, on your own. So please do maximize those resources as well, particularly even with regard to things like the personal statement, writing that for graduate school as we're about to move into. That's something you definitely want to research how to do that the most effectively. You don't just want to cold write whatever you feel like writing. So you want to do some research. There are tons of resources. And a lot of times, actually, even universities will put out, some different public resources. So utilize that community network online as well. So now, if you are in your junior year and you know that you are preparing to go to graduate school or some other sort of professional school, I'm going to say one of the first things you need to do is you need to start preparing for that entrance exam. Do not take this lightly. I am one who went into the ACT and the SAT cold. I was used to taking standardized tests, had been taking them since I was in preschool, wasn't too worried about it, did fine. I will tell you that the GRE is a completely different animal. My students who have taken it also agree it's a completely different animal. So even if you did not prep at all for the ACT or SAT to get into college, you do not want to use that same approach with the GRE. And you need to know that school's policy as well, because some schools, will sort of look at all of your different attempts. Some will take the highest score. So, be researching the policies of the school that you're aiming to get into. Hopefully schools, let me say plural, because I think that you should submit multiple applications. We could probably do a whole nother show on that. But you do want to prep for these. I've taken the GRE and I also took the LSAT. That LSAT is also nothing to play around with. Like, you definitely want to prep for these exams. And I say prepare because it's not like you can study, like, for instance, with a study guide. You can't always know exactly what's going to be on the test, but there are definitely strategies that you can learn. And then there are definitely some basic skills that you can count on showing up on these exams. And so get yourself one of these test prep books from one of the well-known companies. I'm not going to necessarily plug a particular one, but they're down at Barnes & Noble and bookstores everywhere. And really just, it's less about which prep you use and more about you actually using the prep book. You definitely want to dedicate some time, a few months, to really study solidly. Also, carefully prepare your resume or your CV. Pay attention to which one they want. Some schools will want a resume, some schools will want a CV, whatever they want. Be sure that you take the time to carefully prepare for those. I'm going to tell you, I've been on these admissions committees. I mean, when you start getting stacks of things, I mean, you don't want to give people any reason to question your qualifications. And so sort of mistakes, errors that could have been commonly caught on a resume or CV, you just don't want that counting against you. So definitely take the time to prepare it, to get your Career Services Center to read over it, to get other people to read over it, and to give you feedback. The same goes for this personal statement. Thank goodness I had faculty members in my life who read my personal statement for me, because what I started out with and what I ended up with were very different.
Yep.
Once again, this is very different than the personal statement that you typically write to get into the university initially as an undergraduate. You need to be often, first of all, telling a story so that people can remember it, but it needs to be an appropriate story for the audience. The faculty members can give you feedback on that. You need to know something about the program that you're aiming for. So it's not going to necessarily be a generic personal statement for every place that you apply. You need to have researched the faculty members who are at this school, be thinking about the ones you potentially like to work with under sort of a mentee role, and mentioning them, you know, in appropriate ways in the personal statement. And this is where the faculty member can really be helpful in giving you one-on-one feedback. And also be sure that you've started to approach these letter writers. Hopefully you've been making some connections with faculty members on campus. If you're going to graduate school, most of your letter writers need to be faculty, okay? They just need to be. The faculty members, they're gonna know what type of letter you need and what the graduate admissions committee is looking for. Now, maybe one person can be a boss or some sort of volunteer coordinator in the community. Those experiences are certainly valuable, but I'm going to say if they want 3 letters, it's helpful typically if 2 of those letters are from faculty members, just because they know what that admissions committee is looking for. And, you know, you want to have developed a relationship where they know something about your goals, they know something about your work ethic, they know something about your citizenship, and they can speak to, hey, this is a person who you do want in your program. I think a lot of undergraduates sometimes think that you can just apply, and if you meet the minimum requirements, you're automatically into graduate school. Nothing could be further from the truth. Graduate programs, especially the good ones, are highly competitive. And so just because you meet the minimum requirements, you can't make assumptions that that's enough. You definitely want to put together as strong a packet as you possibly can, and you need to take the time to do that. And of course, again, can't plug career services enough at your university. Take advantages of that as well.
One thing about the personal statement that I think it's the hardest part, especially because you've been writing so much in college with a very particular voice. You know, you're right. Trying to, you know, write an essay about, you know, why a certain thing is a certain way or whatever. You know, you're trying to write a research paper or those kinds of things, which is a different style of writing than a personal statement. A personal statement really needs to be a persuasive essay about why you are the best candidate for being a part of this graduate program. Like, right. What is it that brought you here? So your excitement and your energy and your passion has to come through, right. Which is something that kind of gets beaten out of you a little bit in college. Like, you're not supposed to express those things. That's wrong.
It would be like third person objective.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a hard switch to flip sometimes, I find. So sometimes you sort of have to start with a little bit of the blank page word vomit, like, yes. And start with the, like, why do I even care about this? Like, why do I want to go to graduate school?
From your first person approach.
Exactly. Like, I like kids. Okay, start there. Why do I like kids? Where did that come from? What's the thing that made me think about that the first time? I was like, oh, that's weird that kids do that thing. Why do I want to know more about that? Those kinds of things. The more you can kind of get that and kind of trace that story, the better. And chances are, if you've been doing a lot of different volunteering and those kinds of things, that can feel a little disconnected sometimes. But the more that you can find that logical through line of, like, why I volunteered to do work over here, and that led me to this other thing, which is connected to my interest in this way. You know, the more you can kind of frame that as a cohesive story, the more compelling that's going to be to the review committee. And they're going to say, oh, this person, they know what they're after. They know where they're headed, even if you don't have a specific, like, I want to be a research scientist in a particular lab studying this tiny little thing. If you can express your enthusiasm and also that you kind of understand where you're headed and where you've been, that can be really useful in kind of convincing them that you're the kind of candidate they're going to want in their program.
Definitely. And I definitely would echo, it is probably the most difficult part, because you are using this completely different skill set and you're having to, quite frankly, sell yourself, which a lot of people are not comfortable with.
It's hard. It's really hard.
It feels counterproductive, to be sort of writing about yourself. And these are all the things that are great about me, and this is why I'd be a great fit for your program. But not trying to say it in a braggadocious way.
Right.
So it's a difficult balance. I think you're completely right. Another point I want to make too about the letters is do everything you can to help these people, these letter writers, get your letters out and on time. And that goes to, maybe you might say, I'm hoping that you can speak to my experience in this, this, and this to jog the faculty member's memory. Remember, if you'll recall, I took this class in this semester, so that, sometimes I didn't think to ask the student what semester they were enrolled in. I've taught 1,000 classes. Now I'm trying to go through all of our rosters trying to find their name. If it's a hard copy, some schools still require hard copies. And I just feel like, still require hard copy letters.
Yeah.
If it's a hard copy that is required, provide them with self-addressed envelopes going to the place. Provide them with the names, whether it's a hard copy of or electronic version. The names of the people, who are they going to, the name of the program, whether or not the program is master's level or PhD level. Provide them with as much information in an organized fashion. And then do not be afraid to send them reminders. You can contact my students, my former undergraduate and graduate students. They will tell you, you send Dr. Jordan reminders 2 weeks before that deadline. And, and you verify that she's actually gotten around to sending that thing. Do not be afraid to do that. Don't just let it go out into the wind and hope they remember it when they've got 1,000 things on their to-do list. So.
And also make sure that you give them plenty of time to do the recommendations.
That's true. It'll be a better recommendation.
Or just don't do it. Before.
Yeah, no, they're going to be angry. Unless it's somebody who really developed a report. Maybe it's an emergency situation. You really didn't know about this program. If that's the case, if it's a short timeline, acknowledge it's a short timeline. I am Dr. So-and-so. I am so sorry to be making this at the last minute. I recognize that this is very demanding. However, I was unaware of this program. I really think that it's a great fit for me. Go in with an apology and with some humility there. And then again, do everything in your power to make it easy for them to get that letter written, that form completed, and off in the mail or sent off. But yeah, even if I do not start writing a letter right away, if I get the request a few months ahead of time, I'm thinking about it. So I'm sort of thinking about my experiences with the student. I'm thinking about some of the things that I can say, and it's just going to be a stronger letter if you have more time. So that is a great point. Thank you for remembering that. Finally, for the senior year, for people who are bound for that job market, you're going out of school and into the quote unquote real world, you definitely want to be utilizing career services and then applying with intention. You want to use all of your resources to look for potential opportunities. So Dr. Lang already mentioned earlier that community network, your network of people, business people will tell you that this is huge in terms of finding a job, is networking. So you definitely want to use your personal connections. Let people know that you are on the job market. Do not be ashamed to say you are on the job market. Say, I'm looking for work that's related to X, Y, and Z. Okay, so that they all know. Pass your resume around to people. Get it in a good shape, and then pass it around to people so that they know. Make sure that your online presence is professional and is in order and up to date. So all of these experiences that you've hopefully been collecting, now's the time. Go into LinkedIn and make sure that it's all up to date. That you're selling your qualifications. Take a look at your other social media. I mean, and if you like if you don't think that maybe it is selling your most professional self, it's not putting your best qualifications forward, this might be the time to delete some things, to be sure that the settings are appropriate so that you can't just be tagged in anybody's photo, that you have to review things that appear on your wall. It might even be, for some people, it might be a time to take a break from social media, depending on the circumstances. Social media can be a great tool for employers to find you, but only if it's used well. So you have to really evaluate how you're using social media, and be sure that you look like somebody who is going to be responsible, who has qualifications, who's going to fit with the culture of the company, and that you'll be a good worker. So
I would also add that goes beyond the photos. That sort of is the main thing that people focus on, is like, oh, getting tagged in drunk photos on Facebook, and employers finding that and being like, nah, we're not hiring this person. I would argue that it goes beyond that. It even, like, I think about Twitter, for example, which is a little less photo heavy in some cases, and so you're less likely to have the drunken photo issue there.
Yes.
But if you're, if for you personally, it's important to engage in political dialogue or in other kind of controversial, content online, you want to be careful about that, because if your potential employer is looking at it and they see that as a marker for a characteristic that they don't want, that can be a downside. But on the other hand, if you're looking for jobs in a environment where that kind of activism or that kind of energy is what they're looking for, that can benefit you as well. So you just have to think really carefully about your online presence and what it conveys, and does it convey the image that you want and that you want your employers to see.
Definitely. You just have to go into it with your eyes wide open, recognize if that is something that's important to you, then, maybe you don't care, but just be aware, like you are putting this out there. There are other people who can be interpreting it, and they might be interpreting it in a different way.
Right.
That's one of the, they might be interpreting something that you're saying, or that you're maybe a situation that you're commenting on, in a completely different way than what you intended it. And especially if it's sort of singled out apart, they might not be looking at your hundreds of other posts, especially if this is sort of singled out. And so you just have to be aware. I think that's a great point to make. Just be aware of what you're putting out there, and just go in it, whatever decision that you make, go into it with your eyes definitely wide open about that. So we definitely want to use your social media, use your personal connections and your campus resources. And then definitely be sure that you have prepped your resume. Be sure that your cover letter, you should be tailoring that to different positions. Some people say you shouldn't tailor your resume. I actually think you should tailor your resume to different positions. I agree. Especially if you are open to different types of positions. And this brings me to another point. This is one of the main points that I tell students. You have to have a balance, again, sort of going into things with your eyes open. You have to have a balance in terms of any potential restrictions that you might be applying. So if for instance, I live in Houston. I love Houston. If I want to be in Houston, period. This is where I want to be. All right, that's fine. But we're going to have to maybe broaden the types of work that we're willing to apply for, the types of work that we're willing to engage in. You might not be able to find your exact 100% dream job in Houston right away as soon as you graduate. Of course, that goes for any job, really. But you might have to, at any stage of life, but you might have to broaden a bit more if you know that you have geographic restrictions that you were committed to. This even goes if you know that you want to be in a certain state. Again, you're going to have to be a bit broader. Now, if you know that you want a specific type of job, even if it's an entry-level job, you are very committed about the specific type of job that you want, then you might need to broaden your geographic horizons a bit. You might need to be willing to relocate if you are bound and determined that you absolutely must have this specific type of job. So just have that balance between the geographic restrictions and the different career restrictions that you are considering. I guess that wraps up my points, the major points I want to make with regard to the work track. Do you have anything else that you want to add, Dr. Langworthy?
I don't think so. I think that
Okay.
covers a lot of it.
So then moving on to the grad school track. So hopefully you've, in your junior year, you were able to prep for these exams and prep your materials, and hopefully you know where you're going if you're grad school bound, and you know that you want to go to graduate school right after your right after you graduate. Hopefully during the spring of your senior year, you know where you're going. Some of you might be going on interviews around this time. Please recognize that from the moment you get off that plane, you were on an interview, to the moment that you get back on that plane. This goes for anybody, any other students who might be dropping you off, taking you to a party afterwards, people in the airport. You just never know. Who knows? It's a small world.
Right.
So please don't be student gone wild in some arenas, unless that's just what you want to convey.
Right.
But recognize that whatever you're doing is getting reported back
Yeah.
to the faculty members. They are going to get student input. That's why they have them involved.
Mm-hmm.
And they already have a group of students, maybe potentially, who are working in their research lab, and they want to know that you're going to be a student who can drive well and fit well with that lab. So just be aware that you are on interview mode at the entire time that you were in that city or location, wherever you happen to be interviewing. So now maybe it's a program that is not requiring any interviews in order for you to gain entrance, but just go ahead and start to read up on the different policies. There might be prerequisite courses that you need to take, particularly if you're like me. Like I have 3 different degrees, different types of degrees. And so if your graduate field will be slightly different or very different from your undergraduate field, there might be a course or 2 that you could take over the summer that the program would require of you as like a prerequisite to get you on track with everyone else. And that might be something that you could potentially knock out in the summer. It might not be the case, but just exploring those policies, connecting with whoever's going to be your advisor in this new graduate program is really a good thing to do. And then otherwise, take a deep breath and get ready to launch back into school in the fall. If you, let's say that you decided to take a year off, then you're going to want to do things similar to maybe what you've done in your junior year. You want to, again, be preparing for those entrance exams and then obtaining relevant experience. I've definitely had some friends they've eventually gone on to enter very competitive graduate programs, and they took a year or 2 off to work in a research lab or to gain some other type of experience that was related to their field of study. So even if it's an MBA that you're going for, or a law degree or a medical degree, getting some sort of experience related to that field, this can really help you to stand out when you do apply later on. And if you also are taking a year or more off, again, toward the end of that senior year, make those connections with faculty members who later on you're going to need to come back and still ask them to write letters for you. So say, hey, thanks so much for the experiences here. I really enjoyed X, Y, and Z. These are my future plans. I hope that you might be willing to consider writing a letter of recommendation for me in the future when I approach you about that. And so that's all I have for today.
Awesome.
If there are any other things that I can address, I'd be happy to do so.
I have a couple of quick follow-up questions. I don't want to go too much longer. I want to be sensitive to your time, but I know that sometimes, especially the graduate interview process, can be really nerve-wracking for people.
Yes.
I felt that, and I know my fellow introverts out there feel that sometimes. What tips do you have if you're feeling anxious about going into the graduate interview process? And usually for people who don't know, that means you're often traveling to this new school. So it's a new environment. You're meeting a ton of new people, both students who are there as well as prospective students. You're doing lots of interviews with faculty member and other students, and lots of kind of learning about the program, that kind of thing. So what advice do you have for people who are going into that process and are like, I don't know, I feel really anxious about this?
Yes, definitely. Actually, I'm going to answer that because I think it's a good point for those who are going to the graduate interview and for those who are going into the workforce. I actually think that the tips are similar. First of all, make sure that you research that company. So with any interview that I've ever engaged in, I do a ton of research about the graduate program ahead of time. I know who some of the people are before I ever get there. You need to, same with a workplace, like an employer or a business or organization. You want to do as much research, as you said before, online. Use your online tools. Know something about this culture. And then you have your list of questions prepared as well, because you need to remember as well, this interview, I saw idealist.org. I love idealist.org. But anyway, idealist.org had a tweet out the other day that said, remember, interviews go both ways. And that is something to remember. So you definitely want to put your best foot forward, but you also want to be checking to be sure that they're putting their best foot forward. You know, if you can tell a lot about the culture of a graduate program or a business just by observing. And so in some cases, it's nice to be an introvert because you sort of sit back and observe. You've gotten a lot of experience in observing people in different surroundings, and, you know, pick up on these different cues, like how are people interacting? You know, do people seem like they get along well? Do people seem like it's a friendly environment? Are people working well together? Do they seem kind of shut off and siloed? Either way can be fine for you, but you want to go into it with your eyes open and know what you're getting into before you commit to that program. So that would be the main thing. I would definitely take some deep breaths and try to be yourself, because again, the interview is going both ways. You want them to know who you are, the real you as well, the professional side of you, but the real you as well. So just do your best to be yourself, really know something about the organization or the graduate program before you show up on interview day, and then keep your eyes open. I know I've definitely had graduate students of mine who they've gone on interviews and they've come back and been like, Dr. Jordan, absolutely. I mean, we thought these were great places, and maybe they might be great on paper.
Right.
But, you know, they got there and realized, oh, this place has got a ton of drama. You know, you don't want to be involved in that.
Right.
So
and it's also about fit too, right? So it's not, you know, it's about how do you fit within this culture that's at this program or that's in this particular lab. And so, you know, for some people, something might work really well, and for others, not so much.
Exactly.
And so even if it's like the best program in the country, like if it doesn't fit for you, that's okay. Like you don't have to try to force yourself to be something you're not. And I think that's like the other thing that gets tricky too, is that you want to be yourself as much as you can on these interviews, because you're going to be living this for the next, you know, chunk of years. And so you have to be able to be okay with who you are in that space. And if you're not, or if you feel like it's just kind of chafing or not a good fit, listen to that, because that's really important, and it will save you some heartache down the road.
Oh, most definitely. There's nothing that can make you feel like you are trapped quicker than being in a graduate program that is a bad match. And number one great graduate program, just because it's number one ranked nationally, does not mean it's number one ranked by you. So it doesn't have to be. That does not have to be a mirror. So definitely be sure that it goes both ways, and just, you know, do your best to try and remain calm. Engage in self-care as needed. If you need to take a step away, if you need to say, let me think about that before you answer a question, do that. You know, be yourself.
You can say that.
Take care of yourself. Eat right. Take your vitamin C before you get on the plane. All of that.
All the normal self-care stuff.
All the normal self-care stuff.
And then good luck, right?
And it is fun. Try to have fun too, because at the very least, you're networking, you're meeting new people. You might make a new friend out there, or you might hook up with another colleague who you guys could work on a project together later, even if you do not choose to go on that specific route. So you can make that work connection. You just never know. Anytime you're meeting, it's a potential for building your network.
Exactly. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jordan, for sharing
this has been lots
today.
Of fun.
Yay! And for those of you who are watching, if you have questions, you can feel free to leave them below in comments, and we'll try to answer them as we can. And you can also find both of us online in various locations. All that information is in the description, but we're both on Twitter. I'm at Dr. Langworthy, and you're at Dr. Erica Jordan. Is that right?
DrEricaJordan.com. I have to think about it.
All right. So you can feel free to ask us questions there. there. We're also looking at doing this kind of hangout again in the fall.
Yes.
For those of you who are wanting fall specific tips at each phase of the college career. So we talked a lot about things that you should be thinking about this spring. There's also a lot to be preparing for in the fall. So so we'll be back then. And if you leave questions and we don't get to them in the interim, we'll throw them into that hangout too. We want to make sure that we're being responsive to the questions that you have that are bubbling up for you. So
definitely ask us questions.
Yes. So thanks so much to everybody for watching, and we will see you next time.
Yes. Go to class.
Woohoo! Go do the thing. All right. Bye.